Now, over the last couple of years, the idea of going to the office has completely changed and flipped. For many, working from home is the new norm. And with the changing working environments in the office life, I wanted to kind of take a step back and look at now wearing a watch in 2022 with the changing office environment. What are the different approaches that you can take? And with that in mind, what I want to do with this video is look at different office watches, 4 different types of personas. Think about 2 to 3 options per persona, a low, medium, and high in most instances, and talk about, based on the type of attire that you need to wear for your office environment, what would be some great choices to look at. So as mentioned, low, medium, and high in most instances when it comes to recommendations, so all price categories can be represented. But I will say, if there is not a circumstance where that is going to be appropriate, we'll not force it. I really wanna kind of reverse engineer around what is the intended purpose of that type of occupation and pick something that's going to be appropriate. Also, if you like this type of content, thinking about occupations and things of this sort, I'd recommend checking out the 2 videos I believe we've done at this point, looking at watches for different occupations. I can link to those in the description down below. Also, before we jump into this video, check out the new pre-owned section on teddybaldassarre.com. We're getting new watches in all the time from the likes of Breitling, Grand Seiko, looking at Tudor, a variety of brands out there, and really trying to offer up a nice curated collection of pieces that I'm a fan of and the rest of our team is a fan of as well. All the watches are authenticated and tested, and you can also sell your watch to us. So there's a sell page on our site. So if you're looking to move on from a piece, we'd love to take a look at it. So please fill out the form and we'll get in contact with you if it's a good fit. Check it out, buy and sell on teddybaldassarre.com. So now for our first occupation persona, we have multi-situational. And this was, I would say, kind of the catch-all for types of occupations where you have to have a watch that can take a beating. You don't want to have to worry about banging a watch against some heavy equipment or machinery. So maybe you're in construction, maybe you have a hands-on engineering job, maybe you're working in the field of automotive vehicles, just something where you're either using your hands or you're around either dangerous or very heavy-duty equipment on a day-to-day basis. And with this being the idea, the theme for this, I have 2 different watches recommending here. I think you have to go more towards the affordable end, just primarily because I don't think you want to damage anything in these types of environments. And I would say for an analog watch, if you want to go for something of that sort, not afraid to get it wet, one that I would recommend would be the Casio Duro. Now this might seem like an obvious choice, but I think it's a great one to go for if you're trying to get a nice looking watch that, if say you do a lot of stuff with your hands or maybe in more of a warehouse factory environment, but you also have some things you have to do at your desk, this would not look out of place in either of those instances. Now with the Duro, you do have a variety of different options when it comes to dial color and also bezel variations, with a Pepsi bezel version becoming available as well. Case size is going to be to the larger end, but still going to wear smaller than what that case size will indicate. I'd say 41.5 to 42 millimeters with the actuals there. 200 meters of water resistance, reliable Casio quartz movement on the inside. There's just a lot to like with this watch. I think my personal favorite is the blue dial variant. Just released a video looking at the Casio Duro in more detail, kind of just looking at maybe being the definitive dive watch for around 60 or so bucks, oftentimes found for less. It's hard to dispute, one of the best finished watches that you're gonna find for that price range, and just another reason why, maybe just another notch in the belt for Casio and proving why they're so good for the money. And now for a little bit more money, but kind of a general concept. This wouldn't be something I'd be worrying about babying in any way. It's a watch that can certainly take a beating, and that is with the Seiko Arni, the SNJ 025. This is a watch that's not necessarily for me, but I get why so many people like this watch, because it is pretty damn cool. Now, the movie connection, I think for many is the main draw, but once you get past that kind of shroud of maybe pop culture relevance, you get into the core of why I think this is just a cool watch. The function of the analog digital display on the first point of inspection might not seem like something that's like, not for me, I don't like the way it looks, but when you're able to use the kind of somewhat of a crown at 3 o'clock and the pushers on the side of the case, it's not conventional in any ways. Setting the time through that digital display and watching the hands get into position after you set the time. You have the multifunctional features as well, including a stopwatch, you have the backlight, It's a useful watch and also is very sci-fi, and with that black kind of shroud that it's housed within, it is going to have that kind of plastic feel. It just feels like it's something that could take a bit more of a beating compared to a traditional mechanical watch or just a traditional analog watch that's going to be out there. It has a case that's very similar to the Seiko Tuna, basically making it a perfect circle. It is going to be a large circle at that, but it's kind of weird because it doesn't feel overly obnoxious when it's on the wrist. I was actually able to kind of pull it off in a way when you just kind of look past just the large type of construction that it's certainly going for and the connection to Arnold Schwarzenegger. Certainly not a watch for everyone, but I think for this type of circumstance in this multi-situational environment, something that can take a beating, I think it certainly works. Now for our next office environment, we have the casual workspace. So this could be a variety of different things. Maybe you're working at a startup and in between your work lunch hour, you're playing some ping pong. I worked at a startup. This is an absolutely true stereotype. This does happen. Or maybe you're just working in an environment where jeans are okay. Maybe on certain days, sweatpants are okay. Just more of a laid back, relaxed type of environment. And with this being the case, I want to look at our budget option with the Hamilton Khaki Field Mechanical, but this one in bronze. I think this is a good twist on the casual type of look. And when you're taking a dial design that is the Hamilton Khaki, maybe the most basic dial design you're ever gonna find, it's so about the business and what it's going for, but then you have the bronze case that I think it adds a nice little pop or twist to the equation. I could just see some software engineer or someone in a startup environment wearing this on their wrist. It just kind of feels like it has that vibe to it. 38mm case, 47mm lug to lug distance, is going to be thin on the wrist as a result of that manual caliber on the inside with that 80-hour power reserve, sapphire crystal. Do keep in mind that the case will tarnish if you get it, say, wet with like salt water or things of that sort. You can't help prevent this from happening, this aging process, but I think that's part of the charm. The patina and age of the case is just going to add a bit more character, and I could find this being a really fun watch to wear to the office every day and kind of just be a visual testament to the hard work that you have looking down as it ages over the months and years. Now for our next watch, we have the Oris Aquis, and you can probably put any Oris Aquis. I think it's a great, just casual wear. Just kind of that dumb reach, just go ahead and grab it, kind of could work with anything. But this one, maybe not as much, but I think it exudes a lot of fun. And that is with the Oris Aquis Upcycle. When I first saw the release of this watch through press photos, I was like, oh, that thing is not for me by any means. But then I received these watches. We got some watches, in our office. We were just handling them a bit more. I'm like, wait, this is really growing on me. I kind of like this. The ocean conservation connection and how they were able to use ocean plastic to make this kind of almost one-of-one execution. These dials are pretty unique in their approach. They don't necessarily look perfect copy of one another, and that just adds a cool element to the equation here. These are certainly not going to be for everyone, but it has kind of this splatter paint type effect with its use of color. There is a 36mm option as well as a 41.5mm option, so you have some variety here depending on your wrist size. And when it comes to the Aquis generally, I think it sets the standard for what a $2,000 dive watch should look and feel like, and it's kind of that gatekeeper for, I would say, value and quality for that range. And now for our last pick here for the casual environment, more for our high-end watch, I'm gonna recommend the Rolex Milgauss. To me, the Rolex Milgauss is a lot of the explorer elements. You have kind of that day-to-day utility, but you maybe don't have the same amount of versatility and upside when it comes to just being able to be appropriate in every environment. That comes as a byproduct of the Lightning Bolt second hand, the use of color of the crystal and the dial. You have a variety of dial colors to choose from if you're looking back to former references as well. But I just think that these watches are one of the few models and designs from Rolex that haven't gotten pulled away and become a part of the big cycle of hype that's been associated with this brand over the last 3 to 4 years, primarily, and just this ascension into almost a point of transcending the category altogether, which I don't want to get into in this video. But the Rolex Milgauss to me is kind of that epitome of kind of that cool casual wear. And I think it's a fun way for someone to express some individuality. And that's saying something for a Rolex watch. This is one of the very few that I think has a little bit of that still going for it. Pretty solid wearability on this one. I don't see it not working on many wrists out there. And also, it might seem a little bit on the nose, but I could just see this again on the wrist of an engineer, computer engineer, mechanical engineer. It just makes sense. Maybe say that's a basic way of looking at this watch and how this could fit, but it simply would work. And I think it's, again, a cool watch and one of the few Rolexes that, although maybe not for me, again, is not one that's getting pulled into all this hype that's so just tied with this brand nowadays. Now for our next category, we have business casual. So this is an environment where maybe you're wearing some Oxford button-down shirts, maybe you bring in a blazer on certain days of the year. It's okay to wear jeans, but maybe more just smart, dressed up casual type of attire. So a step up from our casual attire. No way would sweatpants ever work. We're looking at chinos, denim, a nice pair of denim, maybe some slacks in certain instances, just kind of that next step up. So to start us off here at the low end, I wanna look at Orient with the Orient Commuter. Now, with a name like Commuter, I couldn't help myself, guys. I needed to put this watch in this video. But apart from that, I think it is still a reasonable choice when you're talking about around $200 what you're getting here. Now, the only area where I'd say this one lags behind some other offerings from Orient and other brands is the water resistance. It is only 50 meters, but we're talking about the office environment, so I really don't think you'd be too hard on that point in this instance. With the movement here, you're looking at the automatic in-house F6922 movement. I find Orient movements run very well for the price category in which they represent. It is on the larger end for case size, just south of 42 millimeters, but it's gonna wear closer to that of a 40.5 to 41 millimeter case. You also are getting the presence of loom here, so it's kind of a versatile do-it-all piece. I can see this working on a variety of different straps, which I think is big upside when you're talking about a business casual environment. Maybe one day you want to rock it on the bracelet, maybe another day you want to put a different strap on it. This just has that versatility that I would be looking for watching this price category. Every single Mito watch that I have handled, I'm always just very impressed. There's never been a watch, and there's a lot of brands, even from like a Tissot and Hamilton, where you handle one of their watches and you're like, you know, this isn't really doing it for me from the finishing department, or maybe it's lagging behind some of their other offerings. Mito just is very steady. They don't necessarily have the same just mainstay or just the definitive watch in a category, but every single one of their watches just feels so solid in the hands. Here with this Patrimony Multi-Fort, I think this is a very well executed design and one of the more tasteful vintage-esque designs that Mito has made in the last few years. This is one of the more affordable avenues in getting into a sector dial from a great brand, 80-hour power reserve, Powermatic movement on the inside. It's gonna have that turn lug style, which is cool to see in a watch in this $800 price range. You do get some different dial colors to choose from. Finishing on the case itself is exceptional for the price here. And it's also walking that fine middle ground between dress as well as casual. I can't think of a circumstance where this watch is gonna be out of place. It's not something that you would see every single day, and I'm just a big fan with this type of execution. Probably one of my favorite Mito watches out there in the market. And unlike some of their other models, I think it's very wearable and will be very much in alignment with some of the smaller wristed crowd individuals that are maybe as loud as any nowadays in watches. And now for our high-end offering in the business casual category, you have the JLC Polaris Automatic. So this is a difficult watch, and I actually have a full video on this timepiece because I didn't think it necessarily got the love that it maybe deserved, but also I think the big note with this watch is it's almost just untapped potential. I think this is one of the more underrated gems under $10,000 for an everyday style luxury three-hand watch. The problem is I think it's just some small subtleties with the delivered package. The purists with the Polaris backstory and having all this rich history and dive watches, you look at the Memovox connection and alarms, this doesn't necessarily have that. It does have the dual crown type of look, but it's more of a traditional three-hand everyday watch, which I think is great, but it's not really hitting on what I think it fully could be. This in a smaller case and really leaning into what I think it should represent, which is just kind of own what it needs to be, that traditional three-hand watch, rather than trying to kind of walk on this fence. There's a lot of fence sitting with the design here, but that doesn't mean that this is a bad watch. I'm a huge fan of the look of this piece, and I think it's one of the more underrated creations and lines from JLC, and I think goes to show they're much more than the Reverso. For this movement here, you have the JLC 898E1. It does have a little bit of a lower power reserve compared to the newer generation of movements for JLC, but still very well finished for the money. 100 meters of water resistance, could look great in a variety of environments. And this is what I would say is a sports watch with elegance. There's a lot of sports watches that don't necessarily have this all the time. It's kind of just sporty to sport, maybe a little bit more sporty to flex, which we're seeing more and more nowadays. This is understated, but it still has that sporty element that I think you would want in this type of environment, in this type of workspace. And now for our final office category, we have business professional. So this is an environment where you are wearing a shirt and tie on most days, maybe a full suit. This is what you're going for here. So you need probably something that's going to be more dress oriented. So that's where this whole collection is going to lean into heavily. To start us off here at a more attainable end, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily the most attainable thing, but I think it's a great representation of value for this style of watch. And I did want to get a different case style because these are going to be mostly dress watches here. I wanted to look at the Longines Dolce Vita. Now, Longines does these heritage dress pieces maybe better than anybody else. And I don't think there's a better representation of a Cartier Tank Americain type of watch that also has its own connection to Longines archive and delivered in a package with this amount of value. I would say this is probably the best choice to go for. It does lean into more that Cartier Tank Americain style with its execution, and it's almost a mashup of that style with a Longines sector dial, which I'm actually wearing right now. I absolutely love this watch. It's kind of a combination of those two ideas fused into one. Comes in with a price range right around $1,500, so I think the price is pretty solid for everything that you're getting here. The curvature of the case, although it is going to be a little bit longer on that lug-to-lug end because it's a true rectangle here, is going to still wear well in a wide variety of wrists, well finished when it comes to the case as well as the handset, the dial. And although there aren't many options when it comes to square and rectangular cases, and it seems like less and less is being prioritized by brands, I think this still remains one of the best representations of a watch of this style in the price range. For our next step up, we have the Zenith Elite Moonphase. I think a Moonphase is one of the most tasteful executions that you're gonna find on a dress watch. There's some great ones to consider under $10,000 or around $10,000 and under. JLC Master Ultra Thin Moonphase, one of my favorites. You could also look at the Panamatic Lunar, which is a different execution, but for around $10,000, arguably the best finish movement that you're going to find out there from a mainstream brand, no question about it. But for a little bit less money than those, closer to around $7,000, you can get some great value with this piece with the Zenith Moonphase Elite. Wearable case on this one at 40 millimeters with that case diameter, 45 millimeters with the lug, and a nice reasonable thickness of 9.2 millimeters, getting that automatic Zenith Elite movement on the inside, the 692. The Moonphase execution is not going to have the same maybe amount of pop as the others mentioned here, but still I would say it's very tastefully done. This is a classic looking timepiece, and it just the same way I mentioned JLC, so many people look at the Reverso. I think when it comes to Zenith, so many people are looking at the DeFis and the Chronomasters, that the Elite collection is one of the casualties of the success of the other lines. And when you get a chance to look at a piece like this, you get to see Zenith as a watchmaker and what they're providing in this price range. This is a very nice dress watch. It falls in a unique range where I find a lot of brands settling closer to maybe outside of the Reverso, traditional rounded case options from a brand with this amount of pedigree, closer to around 10 grand, where I'd say a lot of them settle out. There's a kind of a gap between 5 to 10 grand when it comes to dress watches. And once you get up to 10 grand, you're starting to get into tiers where maybe high horology brands like a Lange pre-owned can start to come into the fold. Maybe there's some different independent options that you can look at. I think this falls in that nice middle ground where it makes sense and you're getting a well-executed product as an end result. And now for our stretch pick for this category, we have FP Journe with the Chronomet Blue. This is, I would say, one of the more hyped watches at the moment, so I feel bad in perpetuating this, but it just seemed like a very thoughtful choice and a great gateway into the world of independence, at least when it was initially unveiled. Not as much now with the prices, but still, I think if you're going for a stretch pick, this is certainly one to still look for. I just think about, CEO energy, somebody who's working, maybe on Wall Street and just wants a very classic, timeless piece from an independent watchmaker that really, I think, set the tone, and maybe one of them that were setting the tone in the shift in buying culture for a lot of high-end collectors looking more towards independence. This has almost become a poster child of that very idea. The dial is unlike anything else you're going to see. It has this kind of mirroring reflection, which is pretty nasty with some of the glare and reflections in certain light. But when you get it at that perfect angle, you're able to really see what makes this dial pop. And it's kind of like this ineffable idea when people just look at this dial like, I don't know why that works, but it just works. When you see it at certain angles, I think at macro, hopefully we can show it, it kind of has this mirroring reflection where it looks like the numerals and the handset are just kind of floating underneath. It's like an empty abyss. I just love the way that this dial looks. It's so unique. Movement on the backside being in full gold also is a beautiful thing to look at, and the unique execution of the gear train to actually be on the anterior side of the watch on the dial side in order to have that nice kind of separation between the twin barrels and the balance wheel that just seems like it's isolated in its own landscape. Prices on these are absolutely ridiculous, but I think for this type of persona, you have a lot of money to spend. Maybe you have been grinding away for the last 20 to 30 years and you're looking for that maybe exit watch or that CEO watch, that promotion watch. This could be one to look at. But all right, guys, that is my video looking at watches for the office, looking at 4 different environments. If you guys enjoyed this video, and know this is a little bit different, but please give it a thumbs up if you did. That's a great indicator that you maybe want to see another one of these down the road. Also subscribe and hit the bell icon. Would appreciate that as well. Definitely check out teddybaldassarre.com, the new pre-owned section on the site. If you're looking to buy a watch, sell a watch, we're getting new inventory in at all times, so definitely check that out. In addition, if you want to stay up to date with written content, because they have a whole nother stream of weekly content coming out, buying guides, individual product reviews, and just overviews, you can subscribe to the newsletter on the website as well. Staying up to date with the content is also helpful by following along on Instagram. You can also see some great photos of watches in the process. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.